Welcome back to Man vs. Weed, the Bushweed Review Podcast. I'm your LP Shill's favorite host, Tango Hotel Charlie. I just got out of trim jail and my fingers are jacked. So much snipping. It's easily my least favorite part of the grow, but, it's gotta be done. So it's all jarred up now, and every day for 2 weeks or so, I'm gonna open up all the jars and let all the air out for a few minutes a day. This is called burping. After 2 weeks, your homegrown flower will be perfectly cured and ready to smoke. All you gotta do is be patient. And make sure it's stored in glass jars, since plastic bags will rub off trichomes. Unsurprisingly, this podcast came under fire by another person that makes a living shilling LP cannabis. It turns out that despite reviewing 25 different companies, I'm still being accused of cherry-picking the bad ones. Hilarious. Meanwhile, these same folks prop up another reviewer that openly makes bigoted comments about trans and native folks on social media. But he's also very positive towards LPs, so who do the LP shills attack? Why, me, of course. Because I'm mean to pre-rolls. Lol. So fuck that bigot Skidmania reviews and any garbage human that supports them. Now, this week's strain is Mango Haze by Kiwi Cannabis. I actually chose this strain myself this week because it's my podcast and I can do what the fuck I like. So what happened was, I saw there was a new legal store in town called Cannabis Plus. I decided to go in and give it a try. I was greeted in the bathroom-sized shop by a guy in green scrubs. On the shelves there were cannabis products with no labels and no prices. I was told by the guy in the green scrubs if I needed any info to just ask. So I started by asking what kind of grams they had to offer. He genuinely seemed confused, and after fumbling around in drawers and shuffling some papers, yelled to somebody else in the back. As it turned out, all they had was chocolate fondue by Snoop and sour bullshit by Mericann, so I told him I wasn't interested in any of those. Then he asked me whether I wanted sativa or indica. I told him I didn't care which, because they both affect me the same. I guess that's all they teach them about at Cannabis Nurse School, because after this point he folded. So I asked him how much the Ness was I saw on the shelf. He gave me some price range of like $24 to $30-something. So I said, okay, great. Can you tell me what strains you have? Then he started naming random strains from other brands. I said, no, I'm asking about the Ness. He said, I don't know what that is. And it was at this point that I just turned around and left. Sorry, Cannabis Plus, but you get a Cannabis Minus from me. So I dipped over to the cannabis store near Robin's work. She wasn't off yet, so I went in myself. They were able to help with the Ness, but it was at this point I realized that Ness is a Bazam brand. So I looked at some honey buns by Tabletop instead. However, a quick Google search taught me that Tabletop is also Bazam. What the fuck? I'm trying to keep it interesting for y'all, so I didn't want to do a brand that I had already done recently. So I looked at Mango Haze by Kiwi Cannabis. The kind staff member looked them up for me and assured me that they weren't owned by Bazam. They were in fact owned by Mericann. Thank fuck, I've never heard of them and definitely not reviewed them yet. So I grabbed some Mango Haze. Now, it wasn't until I got home and I read the label that I realized that Mango Haze is a low THC, high CBD strain. I know CBD is all the rage, but typically I really don't fuck with it. But I figured I already had it, so here we are. So Mango Haze is by Kiwi Cannabis, and Kiwi Cannabis was owned by Mericann, which is owned by Wayland Group, and Wayland Group is also a part of the Canadian Cannabis Corporation. Wayland was started way back in 2013 by a group of people led by Ben Ward, the CEO, and his vice presidents Peter Strang and Silvio Serrano. In 2014, they formed the Canadian Cannabis Corporation, or Triple C. The Triple C are pretty great because they have the first legal cannabis fraud case. That's right, these three assholes are being investigated by the Ontario Securities Commission. The OSC is an independent crown corporation that regulates Ontario's capital markets. They exercise regulatory oversight through the administration and enforcement of the Ontario Security Act and the Commodity Futures Act. Their mandate is to protect investors from fraudulent shitbags. Speaking of shitbags, let's take a look at the OSC's facts that pertain to this fraud case. Now, the OSC fraud case revolves around those three assholes: Peter Strang, Vice President of Real Estate at Triple C, Silvio Serrano, Vice President of Triple C, and Ben Ward, the CEO. The OSC found that in 2014 this trio created an investor's brief and use it to solicit investors for cash. The investor's brief is basically a resume that you present to potential investors. It's something you show them to make them want to invest in your company. Now, usually you tell the truth in it, though. Now, this brief contained numerous false statements, including a horticultural lighting company that had yet to even exist called Grow Light Canada. They claimed that they already owned that lighting company when in fact they hadn't even made an offer yet. They lied about the sales at Grow Light, stating that they had sold 2,000 units in the first month. They of course did not reach this level of sales. They even lied about their credentials. CEO Ben Ward claimed to have a doctorate. All of this was fucking bullshit, and they used it to mislead their CCC investors. Their business plan included a license to grow and supply cannabis, but 2 years later quietly withdrew the application and just didn't tell the investors. Now, during this period, they used that fraudulent investor brief to squeeze 125 investors for over $10 million. Those funds were misused to purchase an interest in and make a loan to Grow Light. And guess who owned Grow Light? Why, Silvio Serrano. The three wasted no time, and without hiring a valuator to determine its value, or address the conflict of interest that was investing in Serrano's company, or even conducting any meaningful negotiation on the price. Instead, they came to a handshake agreement to purchase the company with investor cash and used it to funnel investor cash to themselves in the form of low-interest loans. They ended up loaning themselves a couple $1 million, using Grow Light to defraud investors. Then they directed more than $3 million of that defrauded money to companies owned by Serrano and Strang, but also used it for their own personal bank accounts, and even Serrano's brother and father, and businesses owned by them, including a criminal defense lawyer for Serrano's father. Pretty crazy, right? But that's not all. They also hooked up Serrano's cousin with $63,000 for his companies. These guys were just writing themselves checks at the expense of the investors, and a sweet 2% interest loan to be paid quarterly. Of course, Grow Light never even bothered to make those payments, and they knew exactly what they were doing. But they made no attempt to recover their loan, or even secure their investment in any way, shape, or form. Straight robbery. Then approximately $800,000 worth of Grow Light inventory suspiciously disappeared from storage at the CCC growing facility that never grew weed. Strang, Ward, and Serrano never filed a police report, didn't file an insurance claim, and never made any attempt to recover the value of the inventory. Once again, fucking over the investors. In the end, they just wrote off the loan and completely stiffed them. So for those keeping track, regular Canadians are criminals, and these scumbags are the legal producers. He pretended to have a PhD, falsified sales, defrauded investors, left the company in a desiccated ruin. I'm sure they're all completely innocent, and this is all a big misunderstanding, which is why now ex-CEO Ben Ward shut down all of his social media accounts and fled to the morally ambiguous financial shelter known as Switzerland. And that's just the stuff the OSC is investigating. For example, they also dumped around $30 million into an Australian cannabis company called Mericann. What they neglected to tell investors in this deal was that the grow licenses don't transfer over to the buyer on these deals. So they couldn't even grow cannabis with their new $30 million investment. So this is all to say that when anyone tells you that your buddy who sells weed to pay their rent and put food on the table is a dangerous criminal, and legal weed is the morally correct way to get cannabis, you tell them to go fuck themselves. So this week's sample is Mango Haze by those Kiwi Cannabis crooks. It came in a white stupid plastic jar and was dated June 7th, 2021. Which is about 3 months old at the time I'm recording. It was $22 for 3.5 grams. That's about $6.30 a gram. I've had some bud tenders complain the weed I review isn't expensive enough, and to them I say from the bottom of my heart, with utmost sincerity, eat my ass. That works out to $176 an ounce plus tax. Since it's a high CBD strain, it comes in at just 7% THC and 11.5% CBD. Inside the plastic canna coffin, there is a moisture pack. Terps are present if you stick your nose right in, but it certainly doesn't blow up a room like you'd expect high-quality cannabis to do. But radiation is bad for terpenes, so I expect this from legal weed. The flowers are surprisingly nice looking, with hands down the biggest bud I've got in 26 episodes of this podcast. It was on weight, but the trim job was kinda sloppy, and there was a lot of stem and leaf. The buds are shades of green splotches in a sea of red hairs. They are spongy and dense, and not dry and crumbly. Under the scope, the trichomes are small in both size and number. There's not a lot to see there. I don't know if that's common in CBD or not, because I haven't really fucked with CBD strains a whole lot. But what I can see are battered, frazzled, and mostly ambers. The terps that were in the jar fade quickly, and outside of putting your nose right up to the buds, they're virtually non-existent. If I were to be generous, I'd say tangy and fruity. It's only slightly more pungent after breaking it up. It has a little stickiness to it, though, thanks to the moisture content. Nothing crazy, mind you, but better than dust. This at least helps it hold its shape while rolling and doesn't fall out the ends like dust in the wind. The first puff or two have some earthy sort of spiciness, but is quickly replaced by bitter. The smoke is harsh on the throat, and that might have something to do with the black ash. That's right, I rolled 3 joints out of that 8th, and all 3 burned black. Funny enough, I didn't expect to really get high off this sample at all. I was actually kind of disappointed when I noticed it was a CBD strain, and was tempted to exchange it. Ultimately, I kept it because I thought it would make for an interesting podcast. But it does actually get you high. Slow down, it's nothing crazy. But at the same time, it got me just as high as any other legal sample I've had. From a $6 gram all the way up to a $16 one. This was just as mediocre as the rest. Which is to say it got you mildly high for a short period of time. But if I didn't know it was low THC, I would have never even thought it was any different from last week's 16% sample. So would I recommend Mango Haze by Kiwi Cannabis? A product that burns harsh with black ash? By a company with more crooked roots than a cannabis plant? Fuck no. Thanks for listening to another episode of Man vs. Weed. Without your ears listening, I'm just another asshole ranting to myself on the internet. If you want to support the podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, review, and share the fuck out of it. If you want to piss off pro LP shills, just say something nice about me on Twitter. And if all that sounds like a giant pain in the ass, then just grab your bone, kick up your feet, and free the weed.